All right, it's story time, and I've got a good one for you. I'm going to set the scene for you. It's January 1959 in northern Russia. Here we have 9 hikers planning to go on an expedition to the northern Siberian Mountains in the dead of winter. The leader of the expedition, 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, was doing this so he could raise his certification level to a level 3. Now, if he did this, it would certify him to become an instructor. All 9 of these expeditionists were extremely experienced, and it was a very difficult expedition. So it was expected to last about 30 days, give or take about 2 weeks. So they set out and they had to take several modes of transportation to get to the mountain line to begin their expedition. Before they left for their trip at the beginning, the leader, Dyatlov, told the community that they were expected to be gone for about 30 days, give or take about 2 weeks. So if they were gone any longer than about a month and a half, then it means that something went wrong and that they should send for help. So 30 days came and went, and nobody really thought anything of it until day 44, day 45, day 46. So they were well beyond the month and a half, so the friends and family of the hikers insisted that they send out a search party. So after days of searching, they come across the hikers' camp. And what they see really confuses them. The tent itself had collapsed under all the snowfall that had accumulated over the last month and a half. But everything else seemed to be in order. The skis were still standing up outside the tent. Even the belongings inside the tent, clothes, shoes, diaries, everything was exactly where they would have been when the hikers put them before they went to bed. Even the door of the tent was still closed. The only thing missing were the hikers themselves. So investigators came in and they took over. And what they found was crazy. The first thing was that the tent had been slashed open from the inside. The inside! And coming from that slash were all sets of footprints. As all the hikers' boots still being in the tent seemed to suggest, all of these footprints were barefoot. Now remember, it was negative 30 degrees at this time of year in the northern Siberian Mountains. And after forensics and experts analyzed the scene, they'd found that these footprints were going down the slope in a relatively calm manner. And as they followed the footprints down the slope several hundred meters, they came to a tree line. And it was at this tree line that they found the first set of bodies. 2 of the hikers were laying at the base of a huge cedar tree. Next to them seemed to be the remnants of a fire. There are a couple details about this particular scene that are extremely bizarre. Starting with the fact that most of the branches of this cedar tree had been snapped off up to about 18 feet high. And in the bark of the cedar tree, they found pieces of the men's flesh. The men themselves were extremely underdressed. All they had on was a thin shirt, thin pants, no shoes, and their hands seemed to be burned on the palms. Both men had small injuries on their face to suggest some sort of struggle or fight of some sort, but both of their cause of death were ruled as hypothermia. Over time, 3 more bodies were found between the 2 men at the tree line and the tent itself. All 3 of them were found at different points between the tree line and the tent, and they were all facing the tent, suggesting they were trying to get back. From autopsy reports, these 3 hikers had suffered very similar injuries to the 2 men at the trees. And like those 2 men, these 3 were also underdressed. Amongst these 3 was the leader Dyatlov himself, and the reports say he was found clutching a small birch branch in his hand. Now, if you're super confused and you think maybe you haven't heard me right up to this point, you probably have. It's just extremely confusing. It took 2 months to find the other 4 hikers. They ended up finding them 75 yards into the tree line at the bottom of a ravine, under 10 feet of snow. Now, in my opinion, the injuries that these 4 hikers suffered is the most bizarre part of this story. None of these 4 hikers had any external wounds, but all 4 of them had crazy internal damage, including broken ribs and internal bleeding. The autopsy report says that these injuries were extremely similar to those of a car crash. Now, I understand this next part is pretty gross, but one of the female hikers that was found in this group was found missing both of her eyeballs and her tongue. And again, in the autopsy, they found blood in her stomach, suggesting that her tongue was removed when she was still alive. Another one of the hikers in this group was found with a broken nose and a deformed neck. Now, at some point in the investigation, I guess they decided to check for radiation for some reason, because it's reported that 2 of the hikers had high levels of radiation on their clothing. And I want to add, too, that the 4 hikers that were found in the ravine were actually wearing extra layers of clothing, which suggests that they went back to the other 5 hikers and removed their clothing once they had passed. So after months of investigation, each hiker's cause of death was determined, and they ranged anywhere from hypothermia to blunt force trauma. Now, you can try to use all the details that I've given you to put this together and make it make sense, and I assure you that a ton of people have tried. In fact, there are a lot of theories as to what happened to these 9 hikers. You can vaguely put together what you think happened to the hikers after they left the tent, but the biggest mystery is what caused them to leave the tent in the first place and cut themselves out from the inside. The first theory is an avalanche. Now, I'll show you the mountain that they stayed on, and you'll see for yourself that the slope is not steep enough for an avalanche, and these hikers were way too experienced to set up camp where they would have been susceptible to an avalanche. So the investigators immediately ruled this out. And again, the snow accumulated on top of the tent was surely due to the nearly month and a half of snowfall. Now, one of the other theories that people came up with around this time was that the local Mansi tribe had gotten a hold of the hikers and posed some sort of threat. Except there are 2 problems with this theory. First, the Mansi tribe has no history of violence whatsoever, and second, there was no additional footprints found at the scene. So again, investigators pretty much ruled out that theory. A couple of the other theories that aren't so widely accepted are aliens, Bigfoot, and a government experiment. In one of the photos taken by the hikers as they were documenting the trip, you can see a strange figure coming out from behind a tree. Now, was it a Bigfoot or was it just a hiker with a lot of layers on? I don't know. Now, the only pieces of evidence that seem to suggest that the alien theory or the government experiment theory may be true are the radiation on the men's clothing and the fact that several locals in a nearby town say that they saw lights in the sky around the same time that the investigators think the incident happened. The very last photo taken on the camera is extremely strange when you start to think about how locals saw lights in the sky. To me, it looks like one of the hikers may have tried to capture one of these lights. I also want to propose the question why the investigators would be looking for radiation in the first place, unless they knew something. Again, this did take place in the late 50s Soviet Union when they were doing a ton of secret nuclear testing. I spent weeks trying to figure this out, and I don't know why. I don't know why after 60 years I thought I would be the one to finally crack the case. But about 2 weeks ago, a new article came out regarding this incident, and turns out they now say it probably was an avalanche that made these hikers cut themselves out of the tent. And I'm not buying it. Their story is that they cut into the snow on the side of the mountain to create a wind barrier. And that actually came to bite them because the wind eventually pushed over the ledge on top of the tent. Or something like that. You all saw the pictures. That's not what happened. They did not cut into the side of the mountain. Why would 9 experienced hikers do that? I wouldn't even do that. And they ruled out the avalanche theory almost immediately in the original investigation. So why are they saying that's what it was now? I have no idea what caused this. All I'm saying is I just don't believe it was an avalanche. But I encourage you to go research this story, read about it, go check out the case files. It's extremely interesting. And even if you can't figure it out, I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think happened. Because to this day, nobody really knows. If you like this story or if you have any theories at all, please comment below. I'd love to hear them. Like, subscribe if you haven't already, ring the notification bell. You guys know the drill. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.